Two separate courts in the Nigeria Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, on Tuesday fixed October 27th and November 20th, 2025 for the commencement of the lawsuits brought before them by the founder and publisher of Sowore Reporters, Omiyele Sowore, and the Department of State Service, DSS, over issue of posts published on X and Facebook social media platforms that allegedly described President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as a criminal after the president allegedly said there is no more corruption in Nigeria while the president was speaking at an event in Brazil in the month of August 2025. According to Omiyele Sowore's lawyer, Tope Temokan, today, at the Federal High Court in Abuja, proceedings commenced in the historic cases filed by rights activist Omiyele Sowore challenging the clampdown on free speech and political expression by the Department of State Services, SSS, in collusion with global social media giants Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and X Corporation, Twitter. The suits are Omiyele Sowore vs. SSS and Meta, FHC, ABJ, CS, 1887-2025. Omiyele Sowore vs. SSS and X Corporation, FHC, ABJ, CS, 1888-2025. Sowore was represented by a formidable team of lawyers, led by Tope Temokan, Abubakar Marshall, Alexander Aketa, Dr. S.M. Oyaha, Dr. Maxwell Opara, Akin Sowore, and Akoje Sava. Representation for the respondents. Meta appeared through Mafesimo Teo Yetabo, San. X Corporation and the DSS had no counsel present in court proceedings. The court granted motions ex parte filed by Sowore's counsel for leave to serve Meta and X Corporation outside jurisdiction through electronic means. The originating motion against Meta was also served in court on Meta's counsel. Adjournment. The court adjourned both matters to November 20, 2025, for hearing. These suits filed, following the DSS attempted censorship of Sowore's social media post, calling the president a criminal, mark a significant stand against both local repression and international collaboration in silencing dissenting voices. Sowore insists that no government agency or foreign corporation has the right to muzzle Nigerians in the digital space, Barrister Tope Temokan stated on September 30, 2025. At a separate court where the federal government of Nigeria filed a 5-count charges against the news media publisher, Omiyele Sowore and the DSS had planned to arraign the publisher before the court. Vanguard newspaper reported that, when the matter came up, Sowore's counsel, Marshal Abubakar, objected to the charges being read, arguing that his client had not been properly served. He also noted the absence of legal representation for X. However, Meta was represented in court by a team led by Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Teo Yetabo. Justice Muhammad Umar, presiding, directed that Sowore be served in court, an order not opposed by any of the parties, including Muhammad Babadoko, Director of Public Prosecutions of the Federation. The court then adjourned the case to October 27 for commencement of trial. Punch newspaper also reported that the DPPF then applied for an order to serve Sowore in open court, which the judge granted. Sowore accepted the documents in court. He subsequently requested 3 days, as provided by law, to study the charge and prepare his defense. While the DPPF objected, Justice Garba upheld the request and adjourned the arraignment to October 27. The court will adjourn to the 27th day of October for the arraignment of the defendants, Justice Garba said. The suit dated the 16th of September 2025 was lodged after Sowore allegedly refused to delete the controversial posts about the president. The Sahara Reporters publisher was accused of using his official X handle to make the post. This criminal at official PBAT actually went to Brazil to state that there is no more corruption under his regime in Nigeria. What audacity to lie shamelessly. The alleged offending post, said to be contrary to Section 24(2)(b) of the Cybercrimes Prohibition and Prevention Act 2024, was said to have been made on August 25 within the jurisdiction of the Federal High Court. The charges were brought on behalf of the DSS and the federal government by MB Abubakar, Director of Public Prosecutions at the Federal Ministry of Justice, alongside 4 other counsel to the DSSM, E. Ernest, U.B. Buller, Dr. C.S. Ez, and E.G. Orabor. Social media companies X Incorporation and Meta Platforms Incorporation are listed as co-defendants. Confirming the legal action in a Facebook post last week, Sowore wrote, "The State Security Service, alias at Officials Inc. today filed a 5-count charge at the Federal High Court in Abuja against X, formerly Twitter Facebook, and myself. They claimed that because I called Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu a criminal, I have somehow committed a set of novel offenses they invented and spread across 5 counts. It's hard to believe there's anyone sensible left in these offices that should be making Nigeria work. Regardless, I will be present whenever this case is assigned for trial." Revolutiono. Punch Online had earlier reported that the human rights activist and African Action Congress candidate in the 2023 election vowed not to delete the controversial tweet, despite a request from the DSS to X demanding its removal. Restating his stance, Sowore wrote, "This morning, X, formerly Twitter, officially contacted me about the despicable threat letter they received from the lawless DSS over my tweet on Tinubu. One option I will not be taking is deleting the tweet. Thank you, at X."
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.
Information from the Nigerian Presidency has indicated that there is a plan by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to begin legal action against the country's former president, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, over sustained and continuous rumors in certain quarters that ex-President Jonathan may have indicated interest to recontest as Nigeria president in 2027. The Special Advisor to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on Information and Strategy, Bayo Onanuga, said Jonathan is welcome to join the 2027 presidential electoral race, but Jonathan will have his date in the court of the land. Indeed, the jury will determine whether Jonathan, who was sworn in twice as president, satisfies the constitutional requirements and is eligible to contest the presidency and be sworn in, if successful, for a 3rd term in office. It would be recalled that ex-President Jonathan was one of the most criticized presidents in Nigeria, with politicians, including President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who was then a chieftain of the Action Congress of Nigeria, ACN, forming a coalition of All Progressives Congress, APC, to defeat the incumbent president in 2015. Currently, there is also a coalition formed by politicians in Nigeria, the African Democratic Congress, ADC, to defeat and remove President Tinubu from office in 2027, and lately, reports indicated that the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, is considering joining the African Democratic Congress, ADC, but no official announcement has been made. The speculation intensified after Jonathan met with ADC National Chairman, David Mark, in late September 2025, amidst ongoing discussions about the 2027 presidential election. And Jonathan's closed-door meeting with ADC leaders on September 25, 2025, fueled widespread speculation about his potential run for the presidency on their platform. In a statement issued on Monday, Bayo Onanuga, the spokesperson to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, said, "As we begin the march towards the 2027 elections prematurely foisted on the nation by the desperation of the opposition ganging up against President Bola Tinubu despite his glaring giant economic strides, we are once again regaled with a cacophony of voices, most of them full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, to paraphrase inimitable William Shakespeare in one of his classic works, Macbeth." One recent statement that stands out in its absurdity is Professor Jerry Garner's. The former Minister of Information and National Orientation, moving to draft former President Goodluck Jonathan into the 2007 presidential race, affirmed that the former president would contest the coming election on the platform of the discredited People's Democratic Party, PDP, which bequeathed a legacy of economic ruins, after 16 years of bad governance. Garner even deluded himself, asserting that the former president would defeat President Tinubu to reclaim power after 12 years. Professor, garner of the defunct MAMSER fame, is free to delude himself and engage in his usual comedy. After all, Jonathan's entering the race would provide another job for the Niger state-born former university don. However, we should caution former President Jonathan to be wary of the PDP sugar-coated cheerleaders. Politicians of Jerry Garner's ilk merely want to lure him into the race to satisfy their personal, political, religious, and ethnic interests. They will abandon him midstream, as they did in 2015, and leave gentleman Jonathan in the lurch. Don't get us wrong, President Jonathan reserves the right to run if he wishes. It is his inalienable right to contest the presidency again. President Tinubu will wholeheartedly welcome him if he decides to enter the race. But Jonathan will have his date in the court of the land. Indeed, the jury will determine whether Jonathan, who was sworn in twice as president, satisfies the constitutional requirements and is eligible to contest the presidency and be sworn in, if successful, for a third term in office. Shorn of all those selfish considerations for which some PDP big guns find his candidacy appealing, President Jonathan will also have his encounter with the people as to whether he has anything new to offer after his disastrous 6 years, for which they voted him out in 2015. Let us remind ourselves about Jonathan's record. We cannot forget in a hurry how his regime, devoid of any clear economic agenda, engaged in frivolous spending, ran the economy aground and put the country in dire straits. The nation's economic downturn, which President Tinubu is working very hard to overcome, actually began under President Jonathan. The Jonathan administration severely damaged the economy, and all key indicators declined under his watch. Under him, the so-called business moguls allocated foreign exchange to import fuel, simply pocketing the dollars without importing anything. Some of those big men still have court cases on the issue today. Jonathan and his national security advisor, Colonel Sambo Dasuki, retired, freely distributed security funds to friends and cronies. In 2010, President Jonathan inherited a total of $66 billion, of which $46 billion was in foreign reserves and $20 billion in the noble but abused excess crude account. By 2015, when the people democratically removed him from office, the foreign reserves had fallen below $30 billion, and the excess crude account had been depleted to $2 billion, despite generating record revenue from crude oil sales that the country had never achieved in more than 25 years combined. It is on record that between 2010 and 2013, crude oil sold for an average of $100 per barrel. By December 2014, however, the Jonathan-led federal government could no longer pay salaries to federal civil servants. At least 28 states across the country owed workers huge salary arrears. In contrast, President Tinubu has taken bold decisions over the last 28 months to reset the economy, removing the ruinous fuel subsidy and abolishing multiple exchange rates, which paved the way for arbitrage to flourish. The president has stabilized the economy in slightly over 2 years in office. In 2025 Q2, the gross domestic product grew by 4.23%, the highest in 4 years, outpacing the 3.4% projected by the International Monetary Fund. Inflation decreased to 20.12% in August 2025, the lowest level in 3 years. The foreign reserves stand presently at $42.03 billion. The Naira has virtually stabilized. Investor confidence in our economy has been restored, and investors are betting on Nigeria. In plain language, the nation has turned the corner, and our people have started reaping the gains of the bold reforms instituted by the Tinubu administration. Road infrastructure is being boosted. Old roads are being reconstructed while new ones, like the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway and the Sokoto-Badagry Highway, among others, are springing up. The government is addressing security issues in some parts of the country. We can go on and on, reeling out the many macroeconomic gains of the Tinubu administration. However, the point is that the PDP and Jerry Garner's co-travelers broke the economy. President Tinubu is fixing it. President Jonathan and others are welcome to the 2027 race. They broke the economy before, but millions of Nigerians, who will not easily forget the recent past, will not allow them to return and run it down again.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.
Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Friday stated that many world leaders who do come out publicly to condemn the Israel war in Gaza, do privately thank Israel for staging the war against Hamas, and according to Benjamin Netanyahu, the world leaders tell me how much they value Israel's superb intelligence services that have prevented time and again terrorist attacks in their capitals, time and again saving countless lives. General George Keegan, former head of U.S. Air Force Intelligence, once said, if the United States had to gather on its own the intelligence that Israel gives us, we would have to establish 5 CIAs. This past June, when Israel struck Iran's nuclear facilities, German Chancellor Merz admitted the truth. This, Benjamin Netanyahu stated when the speech was being broadcast live via huge loudspeakers that were placed on the Gaza border while the Israel Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, which, his appearance drew a mix of applause and protest, with some delegates walking out of the hall as he took the stage. You know deep down that Israel is fighting your fight. I want to tell you a secret. Behind closed doors, many of the leaders who publicly condemn us, privately thank us, Benjamin Netanyahu stated in response. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated and blamed the Israel war in Gaza on Iran, saying, Iran terror axis threatened the peace of the entire world. Some parts of the long speech by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the United Nations General Assembly are presented verbatim below. Mr. President, the families of our dear hostages languishing in the dungeons of Gaza, ladies and gentlemen, last year, I stood at this podium, and I showed this map. It shows the curse of Iran's terror axis. This axis threatened the peace of the entire world. It threatened the stability of our region and the very existence of my country Israel. Iran was rapidly developing a massive nuclear weapons program and a massive ballistic missile program. These were meant not only to destroy Israel, they were meant also to threaten the United States and blackmail nations everywhere. From Gaza, Yahya Sinwar dispatched waves of Hamas terrorists. They stormed into Israel on October 7th and committed acts of unspeakable savagery. From Lebanon, Hassan Nasrallah had launched thousands of missiles and rockets at our cities, terrorizing our citizens. In Syria, the murderous dictator Assad hosted Iran's forces, tightening a noose of death around our throats. In Yemen, the Houthis launched ballistic missiles at Israel, while choking global trade at the mouth of the Red Sea. So what's happened over the past year? We've hammered the Houthis, including yesterday. We crushed the bulk of Hamas's terror machine. We crippled Hezbollah, taking out most of its leaders and much of its weapons arsenal. Remember those beepers, the pagers. We paged Hezbollah, and believe me, they got the message and thousands of terrorists dropped to the ground. We destroyed Assad's armaments in Syria. We deterred Iran's Shiite militias in Iraq. And most importantly, and above everything else that I could say to you all that we did in this past year, in this past decade, we devastated Iran's atomic weapons and ballistic missile programs. Here's where things stand today. Half the Houthi leadership are Yemen, gone. Yahya Sinwar in Gaza, gone. Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, gone. The Assad regime in Syria, gone. Those militias in Iraq, well, they're still deterred. And their leaders, if they attack Israel, will also be gone. And for Iran's top military commanders and its top nuclear scientists, well, they're gone too. Israel's 12-day war with Iran, which I renamed Operation Rising Lion, that's from the Bible. This 12-day war will go down in the annals of military history. Our daring pilots neutralized Iran's missile defenses and took control of the skies over Tehran. You saw this. Israeli fighter pilots and American B-2 pilots bombed Iran's nuclear enrichment sites. I want to thank President Trump for his bold and decisive action. President Trump and I promised to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. And we delivered on that promise. We removed an existential threat to Israel, and a mortal threat to the civilized world. We lifted a dark cloud that could have claimed millions and millions of lives. But, ladies and gentlemen, we must remain vigilant. We must remain absolutely clear-minded and vigilant. We must not allow Iran to rebuild its military nuclear capacities. Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, these stockpiles must be eliminated. And tomorrow, UN Security Council sanctions on Iran must be snapped back. Thanks to the resolve of our people, the courage of our soldiers, and the bold decisions we took, Israel rebounded from its darkest day to deliver one of the most stunning military comebacks in history. But we're not done yet. The final remnants of Hamas are holed up in Gaza City. They vow to repeat the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again, no matter how diminished their forces. That is why Israel must finish the job, and that is why we want to do so as fast as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, much of the world no longer remembers October 7th. But we remember, Israel remembers October 7th. On that day, I'll tell you, you can remember October 7th too. You see this large pin here? It's a QR code. What I ask you to do is hold up your phones, zoom in, and you too will see why we fight, and why we must win. It's all in here. On October 7th, Hamas carried out the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. They slaughtered 1,200 innocent people, including over 40 Americans, and foreign nationals from dozens of countries represented here. They beheaded men. They raped women. They burned babies alive. They burned babies alive in front of their parents. What monsters! These monsters took more than 250 people hostage. Those included Holocaust survivors, grandmothers, and the grandchildren. Who takes hostage grandmothers and grandchildren? Hamas does. So far, we've brought home 207 of these hostages. But 48 still remain in the dungeons of Gaza. 20 of them are alive, starved, tortured, deprived of any daylight, deprived of humanity. These are the names of the 20 living hostages. Matan Angrest, Gali and Ziv Berman, brothers, Elkanah Bobot, Rom Braslavsky, Nimrod Cohen, Ariel and David Cuneo, another pair of brothers, Guy Gilboa Dalal, Eviatar David. You saw the picture of Eviatar David. Emaciated, forced to dig his own grave. Maxim Herken, Eitan Horn, Segev Kalfan, Bar Cooperstein, Omri Meiron, Eitan Moore, Yosef Haim Ohana, Alon Ohel, Avanatan Nur and Matan Zangauka. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to do something I've never done before. I want to speak from this forum directly to those hostages through loudspeakers. I've surrounded Gaza with massive loudspeakers connected to this microphone in the hope that our dear hostages will hear my message. I will say it first in Hebrew, and then in English. Hebrew, our brave heroes. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu, speaking to you live from the United Nations. We have not forgotten you, not even for a second. The people of Israel are with you. We will not falter, and we will not rest, until we bring all of you home. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to special efforts by Israeli intelligence, my words are now also being carried, they're streamed live to the cell phones of Gazans. So to the remaining Hamas leaders, and to the jailers of our hostages, I now say, lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages. All of them. The whole 48. Free the hostages now. If you do, you will live. If you don't, Israel will hunt you down. Ladies and gentlemen, if Hamas agrees to our demands, the war could end right now. Gaza would be demilitarized. Israel would retain overriding security control, and a peaceful civilian authority would be established by Gazans and others committed to peace with Israel. Of course, you understand that the war in Gaza has affected every Israeli. But I am sure there are people in New York, London, Melbourne and elsewhere who are probably thinking, what does all of this have to do with me? The answer is, everything. Because our enemies are your enemies. Let's do something else. Another first at the UN. Let's do a pop quiz. Raise your hand if you know the answer. First question. Who shouts, "Death to America"? Is it A, Iran, B, Hamas, C, Hezbollah, D, the Houthis, or E, all of the above? All of the above. Correct. All of the above. Second question. Who has murdered Americans and Europeans in cold blood? A. Al-Qaeda, B. Hamas, C. Hezbollah, D. Iran, or E. all of the above? Correct again. All of the above. So here's the point I want to make. Our enemies hate all of us with equal venom. They want to drag the modern world back to the past, to a dark age of violence, fanaticism, and terror. I think many of you are already feeling in your own societies the radical Islamist surge. I'm sure you do. You know deep down that Israel is fighting your fight. I want to tell you a secret. Behind closed doors, many of the leaders who publicly condemn us, privately thank us. They tell me how much they value Israel's superb intelligence services that have prevented time and again terrorist attacks in their capitals, time and again saving countless lives. General George Keegan, former head of U.S. Air Force Intelligence, once said, "If the United States had to gather on its own the intelligence that Israel gives us, we would have to establish 5 CIAs. 5 CIAs. This past June, when Israel struck Iran's nuclear facilities, German Chancellor Merz admitted the truth. He said, "Israel is doing the dirty work for all of us." President Trump understands better than any other leader that Israel and America face a common threat. He showed the world that when Iran and its proxies murder Americans, take Americans hostage, shout death to America, burn American flags and try to assassinate the President of the United States, not once, but twice. He showed them there is a price to pay for all that. Regrettably, many leaders who are represented in this hall, they send a very different message. Sure, in the days immediately following October 7th, many of them supported Israel. But that support quickly evaporated when Israel did what any self-respecting nation would do in the wake of such a savage attack.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.
Justice James Omotosho of the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja on Friday ruled that the detained Biafra agitation leader, Nnamdi Kanu, has case to answer, because the Nigeria government prosecution team have provided some evidence that requires explanations from the detained Biafra leader. This, the coordinating lawyer to Nnamdi Kanu, Barrister Aloy Ejimakor, said the judgment of the court does not mean Nnamdi Kanu has been pronounced guilty. Rather, the ruling indicated that he should give explanations to certain evidences the federal government of Nigeria brought before the court. It would be recalled that the ruling on the no-case submission filed by Nnamdi Kanu that was earlier slated to be held on October 10, 2025 was abridged and rescheduled to Friday the 26th of September 2025. Justice James Omotosho also rejected request by Kanu to be transferred from custody of the Department of State Services, DSS, to the National Hospital Abuja for medical examination over alleged deteriorating health issues. The court subsequently ordered the president of Nigerian Medical Association, NMA, to constitute an investigation committee to examine Kanu's medical condition and submit a report to it in 8 days following objection by DSS to his request to be transferred to National Hospital for second opinion on his health condition. We had earlier in the year reported that the case between the federal government of Nigeria and the detained leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, apparently took a new technical twist after one of the lawyers of the detained Biafra leader, Paul Erikoro, San, presented and played 3 videos which the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja later admitted in evidence. The videos of former Nigeria Chief of Army Staff, retired General Theophilus Danjuma, saying, "Security operatives in the West Africa country, specifically, the armed forces are working together with the armed bandits to kill Nigerians," stressing that, if Nigerians depend on the armed forces to curb insecurity, they will all die one by one. Also that of Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State, saying, "Politicians are behind killings in the state." Lastly, and the most interesting video played at the court to counter the testimony or statement made by the DSS prosecutor witness over Nnamdi Kanu-led IPOB founding Eastern Security Network, ESN allegedly created by group of youths in the southeastern geopolitical zone of Nigeria, often referred to as Biafra land, to fight in self-defense against Fulani armed bandits or terrorists that were advancing and killing people in the eastern states during the era of President Muhammadu Buhari, was that of the Director General of the Department of State Services, DSS, Adeola Ajayi, who is apparently the government chief complainer in the case, and the DSS DG in the video recorded and published by Symphony News Media in February 2025, narrated how youths at Azare community in Katagum local government area and Tafawa Balewa community of Tafawa Balewa local government area in Bauchi State, when the DSS DG was the State Director of State Security Services, SSS, resorted to self-help and killed all Boko Haram terrorists that came to attack them without depending on the security operatives, according to the DSS DG. When Boko Haram terrorists invaded Azare community, they started shooting and killing people. Then, the youths went after the Boko Haram terrorists and killed all of them, even when one of the Boko Haram terrorists named Khalid climbed a tree and started firing gunshots from the tree towards the people who were on the lower ground. The Azare people resisted and went after him and subsequently killed him, although the federal government prosecution witness identified as BBB, who is a DSS operative, stated that the ESN is an illegal organization because there is no approval of government given to the people of Southeast to establish such a self-help group to defend their land against terrorists, unlike a Motecan security network in the southwest states that was approved and permitted by the government. Also claiming, his boss, the DSS DG in the video, was asking communities to build the first line of defense by thus working with security operatives, but a careful and detailed study of the DSS DG speech in the video shows that the FG witness, BBB, probably talked off points, totally off-key from the original intent and intention of Mr. Adeola Ajayi, the DSS DG teachings and advise in the video, who had said the Azare community people acted in quick response to an emergency situation, and the storyline indicated that the people of Azare prepared themselves in advance, likely purchasing and acquiring firearms equivalent to AK-47 rifles to be able to face and kill all the Boko Haram terrorists that invaded the community, as narrated by the DSS DG. And if true, the DSS DG, the chief complainer, must also be ordered to appear before the court as a defender in the case to present a certified true copy of government approval given to Azare people to defend themselves, or prove beyond reasonable doubts how the people of Azare community were able to kill, merely with the bare hands, all the Boko Haram terrorists that invaded their community with high-precision weapons of mass destructions. In addition, the DSS DG in the video probably advocated for the need for all individuals in Nigeria to have a gun, because he gave an example of a visit to the United States of America, USA, when his host in the US heard a police siren sound. He quickly brought out his gun and said, if the criminal chased after by the US police ran into his apartment, he would use the gun to kill the criminal suspect, and that not all. The DSS DG in the video also recalled and referenced the words of Nigeria former head of state, retired General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, that if insecurity must end in Nigeria, Nigerians must be ready to resort to self-help like the people of Azare community did.
The ruling simply requires Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, the defendant, to enter his defense. It's not a pronunciation of guilt or not guilty. So that is why it's called a no-case submission. So the judge made a ruling that there's a prima facie evidence that needs to be explained. So in common parlance, it calls on him to come and mount his own defense. But there is the other aspect of the ruling that concerned extraordinary rendition. That very one is one that compounded us, because the extraordinary rendition of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is so open and notorious. Two international institutions or two separate panels of the United Nations have made pronouncements regarding his extraordinary rendition and called for his unconditional release. Nigeria is a member of the United Nations and therefore bound to consider that and implement that decision. And in Nigeria here, 3 courts have made similar pronouncements. First was by the Federal High Court of Umuahia, which awarded him 500 million naira. And the Court of Appeal also pronounced that he was a victim of extraordinary rendition. And in the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court that sent this case back to trial, reached the same conclusion, that he was a victim of extraordinary rendition. And all these things are of the record. They are all in the file. And we remember when this trial was being conducted, these very documents were tendered in evidence. So it compounded us, it confused us, that the court now made a pronouncement that the extraordinary rendition had no evidence before the court, that no evidence of it was submitted before the court. And you remember, least but not the last, recently a Kenyan High Court made the same pronouncement. But well, if the court was misled by believing by mistake that these things were not in the evidence, it also said and left the door open that such evidence be submitted. So we are coming back with that evidence, and it's going to be quantum and legion.
So what about the first application on the enemy?
Well, that one too, it wasn't in evidence that the Nigerian Medical Association has intervened. So it came as a surprise. Well, there's a short date given of 8 days for the NMA to submit its report. So somebody is ill, I don't think NIA is going to change much of that. But I think the judge wanted to leave the record open to admit every possible evidence regarding this matter. But meantime, we are disappointed. Our client remains ill and remains detained. And we're not happy about that. His situation requires urgent and emergent care. So whatever the court says today does not mean that the government shall withdraw back. Just 2 days ago, I wrote a letter. A private hospital has also expressed readiness to admit him here in Abuja. For security reasons, I won't mention the name of the private hospital. But the government, if the government appears to have issues with taking him to the national hospital, we have given them an option of a private hospital also here in Abuja.
So it's safe to say that the application to be transferred to the national hospital was rejected?
Rejected? No, it's pending. Yes.
One other information.
It hasn't been rejected. It's pending. It's pending the admission of this report from the Nigerian Medical Association and the opinion of the Nigerian Medical Association. And if you were in court, the judge had ordered that the committee or panel to be considered by the Nigerian Medical Association shall have a member from the National Hospital. So National Hospital is still in play.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.
President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and its US counterpart, Donald Trump, on Tuesday engaged in a tough talk over the recognition of Palestine's state and the Israeli war in Gaza during the bilateral meeting both held on the sideline of the UN General Assembly in New York, where the French president insisted that Israel has already achieved more by killing the top militia leaders of Hamas, saying, "It doesn't work to dismantle the Hamas. This is not the right way to proceed," he said. While President Trump had reiterated and insisted that things will not work the way the French president had suggested, that the October 7, 2023 hostages still in the custody of Hamas cannot be honored with such suggestions. The meeting was held when videos of the French president, Emmanuel Macron, and Turkish President, Recep Erdogan went viral on the internet, where both presidents were stopped or blocked separately by New York police operatives as they tried to cross streets in the New York City over yet to be seen incoming motorcade of their counterpart President Donald Trump. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, called Donald Trump on the phone after his journey to the French embassy was blocked by police officers preparing for the motorcade of the US president, but that of the Turkish president, Recep Erdogan, could be seen quickly surrounded by his security team in a manner that makes the president look apparently in shock. The moment some group of New York police officers advanced towards them to stop the Turkish presidential team from crossing the road. According to New York Times, nothing frustrates a New Yorker in a hurry like finding that a street has been blocked off because some big shot is in town. Apparently, the same is true for the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. On Monday evening, Mr. Macron, in New York for the UN General Assembly, was stuck on a Manhattan street corner that had been closed off for President Trump's motorcade. The meeting of world leaders is, among other things, a traffic nightmare. At first, Mr. Macron did what many New Yorkers might do. he pleaded with a police officer to let him cross the street. "I have 10 people with me," Mr. Macron told the officer, according to video that shows the French president making his case on the street corner. "I go to the French embassy." But the officer politely held his ground and would not let Mr. Macron cross the street. "I'm sorry, President, I'm really sorry," he told Mr. Macron. "It's just that everything's been frozen right now. There's a motorcade coming right now. I'm sorry." Mr. Macron, who has engaged in diplomacy to try to end the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, tried again. "I negotiate with you," the French president said on the video. When that didn't work, Mr. Macron did what average New Yorkers cannot do. He pulled out his phone and called the President of the United States. "How are you?" he asked Mr. Trump, cell phone pressed to his ear. "Guess what? I am waiting the street because everything is frozen for you." It was not clear from the video what Mr. Trump said, but Mr. Macron chuckled and told the American president that he was hoping to have a discussion with him and Qatari officials about the situation in Gaza. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Tuesday. The French president's office confirmed that while leaving the United Nations on Monday evening, Mr. Macron was caught in a freeze when the streets were blocked to allow the American president's motorcade to pass. Mr. Macron's office confirmed that Mr. Macron used the opportunity to call Mr. Trump and said the two had a very warm and amicable discussion about international issues. Mr. Macron was eventually allowed to cross the street. Video from Brut, a French news outlet, showed him walking past food carts and posing for photos with people, including a man who planted a kiss on his forehead. The New York Police Department said in a statement that thousands of officers were on call this week to ensure the safety of New Yorkers and foreign dignitaries during the UN General Assembly. Merci to President Macron for recognizing the dedication and tireless efforts of our officers who safeguard this annual event, the department said. During the bilateral meeting, President Macron asked President Donald Trump that, since over 2 years the Israel war in Gaza began, what has been achieved. The French president said it is not right to proceed with the aim of dismantling Hamas in the Palestinian city of Gaza, emphasizing that recognizing the Palestinian state does not mean the Hamas October 7, 2023 attack would be forgotten. According to Macron, many French people were killed and injured during the attack in Israel. Adding, he visited shortly after the attack to meet with the affected families. President Donald Trump had said that October 7, 2023 is one of the world's most saddest days in history that cannot be forgotten. Saying, "It was a day, babies being sliced into half, young children's heads were watched being chopped off by the Hamas and it cannot be forgotten." Adding, he has always said the last hostages will be the toughest ones apparently to rescue, that, the suggestion of the French president will not honor the hostages.
We're trying to go to the second line, so if we can cross. Yeah, great. Yeah. Cross? Thank you. Anyone needs to cross, just cross this way. Thank you. How are you? Follow up. We are. It should go.
I was always saying the last hostages are going to be the toughest ones, but you can't honor them by doing anything like you suggest. All you can do is say, we want our hostages back, and we want the war to end. We're going to want it to end.
Nobody forgets the 7th of October. I went there a few days after, taking families in my hands, and we experienced all together these horrific attacks. And by the way, we lost a lot of French people in these terrorist attacks. But after almost 2 years of war, what is the result? Once again, they killed the top leaders of Hamas. It works. This is a great achievement. But at the same time, you have as many Hamas fighters as you had the first day. So it doesn't work to dismantle the Hamas. This is not the right way to proceed.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.
There is no doubt that this week may be an interesting week in the international community as world leaders gather for the 2025 United Nations General Assembly meeting to discuss and take a stand over decades of conflicts between Israel and the people of Palestine, especially some of them well known as Hamas fighters, over territorial integrity and sovereignty, most especially ever since the State of Palestine was officially declared by the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, on the 15th of November 1988, claiming sovereignty over the West Bank, which includes East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip, and as at the end of 1988, over 78 countries approved the declaration, including Nigeria, that recognized Palestinian state barely 3 days after the declaration on November 18, 1988, and the numbers have been increasing, particularly since the beginning of 2024 like never before, as at September 21, 2025. Over 151 countries out of the 193 United Nations members have recognized the Palestinian state, including United Kingdom, UK, which its recognition appears to be more disturbing to the Israeli government, with the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, issuing what he described as a clear message to the world leaders recognizing Palestine as a country of its own that it's not going to happen. The United Kingdom, Australia, Canada among others declared and announced their recognition of the Palestinian state on September 21, 2025, while countries like Germany, Italy, Japan and South Korea among others are yet to make their position known. In a video broadcast on Sunday, the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said, "Today, to revive the hope of peace for the Palestinians and Israelis, and a two-state solution, the United Kingdom formally recognizes the state of Palestine," adding that the recognition is not a reward for Hamas, reiterating that the United Kingdom has already prescribed and sanctioned Hamas as a terrorist organization, saying, "Any member of Hamas will not be a member of the Palestinian government, including joining the security architectures of the Palestinian state." A statement by the Prime Minister of Israel Benjamin Netanyahu issued a few hours after the video broadcast by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer. The Israel Prime Minister said there would never be a Palestinian state to the west of the Jordan River. In quotes, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, "I have a clear message to those leaders who are recognizing a Palestinian state after the horrendous October 7th massacre. You are rewarding terror with an enormous prize. And I have another message for you. It's not going to happen. There will be no Palestinian state to the west of the Jordan River. For years I have prevented the creation of that terror state, against tremendous pressure, both domestic and from abroad. We have done this with determination, and with astute statesmanship. Moreover, we have doubled the Jewish settlement in Judea and Samaria, and we will continue on this path. The response to the latest attempt to force upon us a terror state in the heart of our land will be given after my return from the United States. Stand by."
In the face of the growing horror in the Middle East, we are acting to keep alive the possibility of peace and a two-state solution. That means a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable Palestinian state. At the moment, we have neither. Ordinary people, Israeli and Palestinian, deserve to live in peace, to try to rebuild their lives free from violence and suffering. That's what the British people desperately want to see. Yet, almost 2 years after the barbaric attacks of October the 7th, hostages are still held by the terrorists of Hamas. Recent images show the hostages suffering and emaciated. Hamas even refused to release all the bodies of the dead. I have met British families of the hostages. I see the torture that they endure each and every day. Pain that strikes deep in people's hearts across Israel and here in the United Kingdom. The hostages must be released immediately, and we will keep fighting to bring them home. Let's be frank. Hamas is a brutal terror organization. Our call for a genuine two-state solution is the exact opposite of their hateful vision. So we are clear. This solution is not a reward for Hamas, because it means Hamas can have no future, no role in government, no role in security. We have already prescribed and sanctioned Hamas, and we will go further. I have directed work to sanction other Hamas figures in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, the man-made humanitarian crisis in Gaza reaches new depths. The Israeli government's relentless and increasing bombardment of Gaza, the offensive of recent weeks, the starvation and devastation are utterly intolerable. Tens of thousands have been killed, including thousands as they tried to collect food and water. This death and destruction horrifies all of us. It must end. We have evacuated the first group of sick and injured children to the United Kingdom to be treated by the NHS, and we continue to increase our humanitarian support. But still, nowhere near enough aid is getting through. We call again on the Israeli government to lift the unacceptable restrictions at the border, stop these cruel tactics, and let the aid surge in. With the actions of Hamas, the Israeli government escalating the conflict, and settlement building being accelerated in the West Bank, the hope of a two-state solution is fading. But we cannot let that light go out. That is why we are building consensus with leaders in the region and beyond around our framework for peace. This is a practical plan to bring people together behind a common vision and a series of steps, including the reform of the Palestinian Authority, that takes us from a ceasefire in Gaza to negotiations on a two-state solution. We will keep driving this forward. As part of this effort, I set out in July the terms upon which we would act in line with our manifesto to recognise Palestinian statehood. That moment has now arrived. So today, to revive the hope of peace and a two-state solution, I state clearly, as Prime Minister of this great country, that the United Kingdom formally recognises the State of Palestine. We recognised the State of Israel more than 75 years ago as a homeland for the Jewish people. Today, we join over 150 countries who recognise a Palestinian state also. A pledge to the Palestinian and Israeli people that there can be a better future. I know the strength of feeling that this conflict provokes. We have seen it on our streets, in our schools, in conversations we've had with friends and family. It has created division. Some have used it to stoke hatred and fear, but that solves nothing. Not only must we reject hate, we must redouble our efforts to combat hatred in all its forms. We must channel our efforts, united together in hope, behind the peaceful future that we want to see. The release of the hostages, an end to the violence, an end to the suffering, and a shift back towards a two-state solution as the best hope for peace and security for all sides.
Osazuwakan Radio, bringing you the news in a more digital way. Osazuwakan Radio, bringing you the news in a more digital way.